lovely Alyssa's holding the phone. Onyx likes to stay moving, but this is simple stuff and I have a very specific job. I'm starting my workout right now. This is the very first thing, and I need to teach you the two most important ATG principles, which are number one, flexion versus extension, and number two, short range versus long range. We'll start with the flexion versus extension. Triple extension. Think a calf raise, think a squat, think a Romanian deadlift. That would be ankle extension, knee extension, hip extension. Well, what am I doing here? I'm doing ankle flexion. Triple extension has quite literally thousands of research papers and studies done on it. 0 studies exist on what happens when you actually get stronger ankle flexion. Now we're going to factor these teaching points into 3 things. Number 1 is that everyone can do it. You can start with 1 pound. Everyone can do this. Number 2, it's coachable. It has a specific exact form and an exact load, so you know if you're getting stronger or not. And then number 3, it's an investment. The stronger I get in this position, then when I play basketball, I get less trauma in the first place to my knees. You see what I'm saying? So the effort I put in my training is now an investment to make the whole rest of my life richer. Now, you could see the direct opposite, just to make sure it's really clear, would be a calf raise. And there's nothing wrong with this. We want to get as strong as possible in ankle extension. We just also want to be as strong as possible in ankle flexion. So maybe ATG is not only not unorthodox, maybe it's actually the most natural system that everyone can benefit from. Now, I'm going through my warm-up here. And now here's another big one, much like ankle flexion. This is now hip flexion. Now hip flexion, again, 0 studies on coachable. You can start this with no weight, measurable strengthening of your hip flexors, even though these hip flexors are the biggest difference between regular humans and elite sprinters. So a squat would be a good example of maximally strengthening your knee extension, whereas a Romanian deadlift, which I worked on yesterday, would be maximal hip extension. So Romanian deadlift for hip extension has been well studied, but what about hip flexion? Myself and many others remained slow until we got stronger in the very muscles that picked up our leg. And I've coached thousands of athletes, and what I do is I look at what are the common denominators of these best athletes, and guess what? They have the best triple flexion because everyone's in the weight room, literally everyone, powerlifters, CrossFitters, Olympic weightlifters, we're all in there getting stronger on triple extension, and we want that, and we also apply short range versus long range to that. That's the second big ATG key, but we're missing the triple flexion. So if we drive up triple extension, what about the natural freak athlete? He was designed by God. He has both in equal ratio. So the fastest athletes I've ever tested, pound for pound, had the strongest hip flexors too. It doesn't mean you can only train hip flexors. It just means that genetically, someone who is naturally fast is going to have the hip extension and the hip flexion. So if you only do RDL but don't measure, you drive up hip flexion, you're simply missing out on physics. Now, short range versus long range. Notice my squat. Well, I've seen Olympic lifters criticize powerlifters for not going deep enough, but Olympic lifters don't squat as much weight as powerlifters can squat. Okay? Well, what about me? I just want to be able to dunk and be bulletproof. So I add the slant board. That allows me to get fullest range of motion at the bottom, full range of motion like the Olympic lifter, but then I add a ton of band tension at the top, and it's through the top half. And the reason for that, I get asked all the time, even though I put it in videos, come look like diagonally from here. I want you to look at something. All right. As you go down, you get weaker, 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 weaker. No, wrong. You don't get weaker here because you're resting. Your own hamstring starts resting on your calf. So that is why I set up the bands to kick in at that halfway point when it really does start getting easier. So now I'm getting that full range of motion. So I'm using what a powerlifter uses. So a power lifter is trying to get strong here. An Olympic weightlifter is trying to get strong there. So that would be an example of short range versus long range, but let's get it even more specific. In today's workout, I'm working the Nordic. Take a look at my knees at the top of a Nordic. The top of Nordic, there's no load yet. But what did I work in my last knee flexion session? I worked with the monkey foot, which you could use bands, where the tension's all right here, and there's no tension right here. That's an example of short range versus long range. So when I do a levitating Nordic, that's only testing That's not testing my short range knee flexion strength. That's testing my long range knee flexion strength. And when I use the monkey foot, and you could use a band, that's not testing my long range knee flexion strength. That's testing my short range knee flexion strength. So there you go. Please comment if I succeeded in teaching you. And I wanted to mention one more thing on that hip flexor, short range versus long range. We're not only getting strong in the short range. The ATG split squat, you get crazy strong in that long range. Notice with a regular lunge, you're not getting strong. So we're loading this position, and we're getting world-class hip flexor strength in the long range position and the short range position. So please comment if I was able to succeed in teaching you the two most important theories of ATG, because there hasn't been tests on this stuff yet, which is not just triple extension, but also triple flexion, and not just strength in one side of the body, strength through the full range, meaning not just the deepest range, the top range and the bottom range, and that both those factors everyone can do at some level. I have videos on every single thing I showed, how everyone can do it at some level and how it's coachable, right? You could start with no weight, then you can go to a pound. So it's a very strict, do you get above parallel with the back knee staying straight, right? Very precise, it's coachable. Everyone can start it. And it's then money in the bank, because now you're having less pains, less injuries. You're now succeeding more in life and in sport. So this is the same concept as you put money in the bank, but it's not really in the bank like you think, because the government's going to cause inflation. That's aging, right? At some point, we're not going to be able to spend our money. Life's going to have an end, right? But with the smart investment, we can live the rest of our lives richer, with more security. So now that we're not getting hurt, you see, now once you get hurt, now you go on a cycle, now you lose. So this is an investment that makes us exponentially more money, that makes us exponentially more bulletproof. Have a good one, ATG fan. Much love.